behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding the facts.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. It is a fine, crisp morning in Canada, just like most of the days in February. And I don't mean to complain a lot about it, but, you know, typically I get to escape this for a week here and there and go to a warmer climate somewhere, but not this year. We are going to not enjoy ourselves at all this year because that would be counterproductive. Anyways, we have a lot to talk about today, so we should get right to it. And I would like to introduce my lovely and talented co-host, Miss Carrie Barber, but I am also going to offer Carrie a joke. So, Carrie.
Yeah. Good morning, Andy. All right, let's hear your joke. Is this a dad joke?
It kind of crosses the line.
Okay. All right.
And I'll tell you what the source is, which will throw a wrench into those gears as well. So the joke is, Bill Withers, ain't no sunshine. That's bad grammar. So he said, I know.
You are silly. That's a good one. It's a good.
My mother told me that joke.
Oh, did she? Well, way to go, Mom. That was good. Did she sing it too?
No. Actually, she posted it on Facebook. So I used her voice in my head, to hear it. So she is a good singer, so it works. It works for her.
Nice.
So how the hell are you this morning? Are you good? Are you disabled?
I'm good.
Are you? What the heck?
Well, yeah. Currently and always disabled. But I added a new piece to this. I blew out my knee, and it was so funny because first off, I got to commend the orthopedic surgeon and the office because I made the call yesterday at 8 a.m. and they were like, "Can you come in now?" I'm like, I got a shower. They're like, all right, we'll see you at 11.
I don't have a car. Well, can you walk?
Right. That was that. So what I ended up doing was I went at 11. By 11:15, they already had x-rays. 11:20, the surgeon's sitting in front of me. He's going, oh, boy. He's like, you've lived a good life. So knee is completely gone. But the problem is I'm so young. That, a knee replacement only lasts so long. He's like, so you'll be looking at like 2 or 3 of these. So let's hold it off as long as we can. And so they ended up doing a steroid injection right there. I've never had one. And I got to say, the way that they did it was so patient-centric. Like they put the topical, they sprayed that on so you couldn't feel it on the skin. And then they did a injection site where you won't feel anything after that like your dentist does, and then they did the steroid injection. So it was a really tiny bee sting, but I gotta say today I can walk again, so hallelujah.
Oh, that's great.
It is it's an absolute godsend, right? Mm-hmm. But because of the potential side effects of it, if you get it too much, you have to have quite a bit of time go by before you could possibly get another one. I've had 2 in my life. I had one for a torn type of rotator cuff injury in my throwing arm when I was younger and playing a lot of ball. And then, of course, last year when my back went out, I needed a cortisone style epidural in my back so that I could start to recover from the locked back that was disabled me so much. People remember last year when I was on the shelf and Gary actually brought in someone to replace me for a little while because I couldn't even sit. So there was no way to do this kind of show, right? Because I could stand here, but all you'd look at is my midriff. You wouldn't be able to see my head. So, so but yes, again, they are almost instantaneous in the repair that it needs, right? And you see this a lot of times in sports with.
Oh yeah, I've had them. To an extent, they work. Depends on where and what your injury is, but the knee is supposed to be one where it's like magically.
Oh, it is
basically
magic. Like as of yesterday, I still had issues. The pain was gone, but I still had issues with swelling and everything else. But today, woo! It's So it was interesting. I had a moment of karma because my Uber driver, for those who don't know, I don't drive. My Uber driver on the way home, she was having the same problem, but had a horrific experience with her doctor. So I got to share with her. So by that afternoon, she sent me a text and she's like, "You're right. These people are awesome."
That's great. I love that. Oh,
it was kind of serendipity. It was like, I got to share my experience. Sure. So yeah, it was good. I was happy. I'm happy today. I'm a little hyper. So the side effect with this is, for me, I don't know.
I get the same thing.
I'm hyper and hot flashes, which I am having my own personal vacation right now.
Yeah, you're basically in a tropical climate at this point.
I am.
Jeez, it's like you're like the sun right now.
I'm glowing
with extra sunspot activity. I would say, Carrie, we haven't actually formally introduced our guest.
No,
maybe we should do that.
Yeah. So this is a guest that we have had on, and we just absolutely love her take and her perspective on things. Thank you. She's a health and wellness expert. She's got clinical psychology experience, and she'll correct me on all of this because we didn't compare notes before.
We didn't prepare anything.
No, but we wanted to bring her in particularly on this topic because it's such an interesting thing. So this is Dominique Miller. Everyone, welcome back, Dominique Miller.
Hey.
Yes, I think she has now friend of the show status.
Ooh, I love that. Thank you.
And we gotta send
even
her
if we didn't like
now.
you've been here long enough that we have to call you that.
Yeah,
we do like you, so don't worry. We're good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So the topic today, before we get into it, I want to get to a couple pieces of things that happened. We got to cover it. But I don't want to take a lot of time with it because I really want to get into this discussion with Dominique as it pertains to Black History Month and woke whiteness and what's actually happening. But first, I do want to make mention that Julian Assange is still under. They're still gunning for him here in the U.S., and the Biden administration has already announced that they're going to continue to fight for his extradition. So just a reminder, Julian Assange, I know what they have described that he's been accused of, but let's put this in perspective. What he is being charged with, Bob Woodward should be in jail right now, right? So when you're a journalist and you're reporting and you have a source that is willing to give you information, what they're calling coercion is, hey, we'll protect you and give you cover if you're willing to go public with this whistleblower status. So that is what he's being charged with. And any journalist around the world should be paying close attention to this. And I got to tell you that the rest of the world it's not being covered here in the US. And we've got to go out to specific journalists here. Kevin Gunstarla, I'll put a link. I butcher his last name, and I apologize, Kevin. Kevin out of Chicago has been just relentless and heroic in covering the entire trial and everything that's going on with Julian Assange. So shout out and kudos to Kevin, and I'll put a link up so you could follow him. But if you're a journalist in the US, even if you work for a corporate network, you are not protected. if this is allowed to go through, then anytime you have somebody who gives you inside information as a whistleblower or even calls out corruption, they themselves could then be charged under these same laws. And that's why this is so important. So whether you love Julian or you hate him, it's not really the point. The point is how we are pursuing doggedly injustice against this particular individual. So this is what's at stake. And I mentioned it last week that I myself got targeted with a QAnon label, even though I use publicly available sources, including Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's campaign data that was submitted to the Elections Commission. That's fec.gov. You can go through all of the data that's publicly available. I got hit with a label. And then we're seeing demonetization and censorship and all of those. So we've had those conversations before, and we're going to have them again, in particular about Julian Assange and what the hell, right? So we
exactly. And it's like when you look at it on its face, right? And I would refer to this as U.S. propaganda item number 3, right? Just for lack of a label. But this is the by all intents and purposes, the definition of fascism, right? The stifling of honest reporting to help the oligarch state. This is the definition of it. If you're looking for what fascism is, read this story, find out about it. All of the emphasis on Trump and this impeachment trial, which is all just smoke and mirrors for the bullshit that's being covered up right now because of this fiasco that's going on. That's the definition of fascism. And people need to come to that understanding because we are entering such dangerous territory. I mean, we already have a mainstream media that is controlled by corporations, right? You have now us in the, whatever you want to call it, alternative media, social media, what have you, right? That are now being deplatformed and demonetized by corporations that run the platforms, the only platforms that we have, right? These stories are huge.
Right.
And this is our only real tool to fight against this fascism. That's why it's so important.
Right. And I think we did things a little bit differently here on our network because we could see what was happening. Fascism and the march towards fascism didn't begin, nor did it end with Trump. This has been the way that it's been going for decades. So what we did is structured a little bit differently. First off, we're volunteers. Second, our overhead is so low that we are continually thankful for our Patreon donors because you are doing an amazing thing in helping keep us on the airwaves, supporting our platform, all of our backups, our security, all of this sort of thing. So when you see people like Tim Black and Jordan at Status Quo
and Jamal Thomas.
Yeah, just all of these really great pundits and journalists who are losing their revenue streams because of this. That's really disconcerting. So we tried to do it a little bit differently, and we get most of our funding either through our store. So thank you for everyone who's been purchasing. And by the way, Rome has been just, the people are just flocking to all of Rome's gear. So kudos to Rome and all of his audience. But that keeps us on the air so that we don't have to worry about demonetization. But all these other journalists do, right? They don't have another job that they're solely focused on providing news and credible information. And it's really hurting them. It's not hurting corporate because they are in a pay-to-play kind of situation. Number one is, with the fourth branch, you have the guaranteed protections of journalism that is a public good, but yet they're putting up paywalls. So Okay, so now it's a poll tax on that.
Capitalism at its finest, right?
Right. And then at the same time, they're not necessarily going to report accurately because they've got to cater to the people who are buying the ads, like big pharma and insurance companies, and then also gaining access, right? You don't want to have your White House credentials revoked because you said something that was maybe a little too honest about the current administration, right? And in fact, the White House now is asking for questions in advance. That's kind of odd, but you know, we weren't supposed to be having to worry about any of this once Trump left office, but yet here we are. So kids are still in cages.
It's no different. It's no different, right? The last 4 to 5 decades, it's the move towards fascism is you can't deny that, right?
Is it meet the new boss, same as the old boss? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah. The only thing different with Trump is he gave it a color, right? Yeah,
that's true. Orange.
Well, orange is the new white supremacist, I guess. I don't know, however that goes, but. Yeah. Hello.
So with that, let's get into our topic today, because it's a similar kind of narrative about how communication and things have been manipulated. And in Black History Month, we want to point out these things to our white allies or seeming white allies, that the words that you choose and the behavior that you choose really has a lasting effect. And so while they're calling for unity in Congress that they're not going to get with seditionists, just they're not. There's 147 still sitting there. But what we're talking about is how do we build bridges with our neighbors, right? Because I was having a conversation with somebody, 2 QAnon wellness people yesterday on a Chicago Tribune article about vaccines, and they were just full on misinformation and didn't want to hear any facts. But when you're on social media, you're writing for the people who will see your comment, not necessarily for the person.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So we brought Dominique in to pivot a little bit. So how do you have these conversations? How do you diffuse it? How do you build bridges and get these people, pull them back when they're personal relationships, either family or friends or things like that? So we wanted to focus specifically on the woke wellness industry. I can hear her already.
I've got experience there, so
right. So you are the perfect expert to bring in. And there were 2 articles that I shared with Dominique yesterday, and they're kind of making the rounds. So you may have seen these. The first one was on Scientific American. This is the science of spiritual narcissism. So this was an interesting look at how I immediately, and Andy, I wish I'd have gotten you the video sooner, but the gentleman, the little red-haired gentleman who does the the woke parody videos.
Oh, yeah, JP Sears, yes.
Yeah, okay. So
yes.
I immediately thought of that guy.
Yeah.
When he was doing like the vegan thing or the meatitarian or whatever. So it's kind of a parody, but there's a reality to this.
Oh, yeah, and I didn't realize that this guy literally is full-on QAnon.
Is he?
I was like, what?
Oh.
I thought it was a parody. It's not a parody. Like it's supposed to come across like it is, but it's not, which is like exactly the issue. It's this woke spirituality, but it's very whitewashing and very very edgy. It's like, okay, edgelord JP Sears, like, congratulations on blurring the line between reality and comedy.
Never in my life would I have thought that he was serious about that, because it's so ridiculous and out there. But
and I feel like he almost does these parodies, and this is just my take on it, allegedly, etc. But I feel like he almost does these parodies in order to cover up the fact that he actually believes this stuff. And it's just, in what world do you get away with that?
Right. But it's a good cover, right? Like on Twitter, there is a person that goes by the Twitter name Never Socialism, right? And there's just enough comedy in there that you are always left wondering, is this a serious account or is this a parody account?
Right. And that's the issue, right?
Well, okay, so getting to this article, let's start with the Scientific American, because there's another one on Vice, and Vice I'm a little iffy with.
Yeah, I hear you.
But Scientific American actually broke this down, and they actually presented a couple different studies. So they were talking about how the wellness industry, and it is an industry, and I can't help but feel like we have to have a wellness industry because our Western medicine the system is so broken that it provided this opportunity for. Now, I'm not going to discredit all health and wellness because the cannabis industry came out of this, right?
Exactly.
So what I'm talking about are entrepreneurs who are in it for the dollar and willing to go the extra mile and go into the anti-vaxxer. And I just recall this conversation with this very nice gentleman I had last week where he was very much an anti-vaxxer, and he said, but all of the medications they put into you are just toxic and chemicals. And I'm like,
oh, honey.
But they're sourced from
nature.
Have I got a cortisone shot for you?
Right? That's exactly right. So in this particular, they mentioned a couple different studies, and to me, it feels like this is ego driven, right? So if I am now wearing a new Fitbit. I have had friends who have been on me for 10 years to get a Fitbit. I finally have one. So I find myself programming in goals, and I can see the feelings, starting to develop where, okay, I've met my goals. Where do we go from I've met my goals and I'm proud of my achievements to now I'm a little bit better than you?
Well, I mean, isn't that kind of that thing that the toxic side in everybody wants to see happen, to have someone to feel better than or to look down on? It's like, for instance, why after a recession do we always blame poor people? Why, we have to look down on someone else to feel better about ourselves. And everybody has that side of that shadow side of their ego, of who, because your ego is part of your identity. Everyone has that shadow side of it, but it's like it's on us. It's incumbent upon us to look at that and to say, I'm not going to participate in that kind of behavior. I'm better than that, and I'm going to choose to be better than that, and actively every day.
Which is interesting because now I'm not into yoga or things like that, obviously, but isn't the whole foundation, and this article actually touches on it, where you are supposed to diminish the ego, and that's yes, and it's not a particularly, in my opinion, as someone who's got a psychology degree but also has a wellness business and does stuff like yoga and meditation and that sort of thing. I feel like saying to disconnect from your ego, it's like, okay, disconnect from your left arm. No, your ego is always there. These people want to pretend like your subconscious mind doesn't exist or you can control every single thought you have. No, I mean, you can detach from your own, to an extent, from your own subjective experience of the world. You can't detach from a whole part of yourself. Your ego, your super ego, and your id are the three integral layers of the human psyche. So to me, it's like it's missing the mark when they're saying ego. But then we were talking about yesterday, when people do get really into that and they do feel that they've become enlightened, they tend to say things like, well, I'm not looking at things from an egotistic perspective anymore. I've discarded the ego. I'm past that. And it's like, no, you're not. The fact you're even saying that means that you're not.
Yeah, it's like No, you're worse now.
Yeah, you're a lot worse now. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's completely counterproductive to what you're trying to accomplish.
Yes, exactly. And now you're insufferable. Thank you. Yeah.
That's right. Now you're just an asshole, right?
Basically.
Right. So, not to pick on wellness or whatever, but I am a deeply religious person, and I keep having to explain myself to people, like, so all Abrahamic religions, I can't speak for others, but if it's based on an Abrahamic religion, the whole focus on you is it's a personal choice and a personal path to your own individual perfection, right? So the ego is managed in a way that you should be so focused on the areas that you need to perfect that you cannot see the imperfections in others. And and so we saw this under the rise of Trump, especially with evangelicals who were wholesale into the myth that he was the anointed one, the lion, and he was going to come in and do X, Y, and Z and drain the swamp, and there would be an epiphany, right? So this was the great lie that was sold also by evangelical pastors who are profiting off of this rise too. So it's a similarity between the wellness who have a spirituality of some kind in play as to also the established religious organizations. They were both engaged in this, Andy, you called it capitalism.
Yes, because it has to fit that narrative every time, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the whole idea, right? If you want to preach in society about the better self, that has to be integrated into a system that, divides people, right? The two are almost mutually exclusive, but somehow you have to weave the two of them together, that when you can attain some level of nirvana as a capitalist and as a spiritually enlightened person, right? Which is totally counterproductive, right?
And it's interesting, Carrie, that you used the word, evangelical, because I feel like these spiritual gurus and the lifestyles that they promote are actually right in line with that, like kind of really far right-wing, super evangelical religious. It's like they think that they're so much better, or that they're so separate from that, but they're not. They're really the exact same thing, just in different packaging.
Right, and I got to be fair. All right, so I am a Roman Catholic, deeply devoted Roman Catholic, and I always am reminded of the image of Mike Pence when he was governor of Indiana, having a big show about rejecting marriage equality. And at the signing of this bill in Indiana, he had 3 nuns standing there, and I almost wept, because these are women who are supposed to know this faith inside and out. And when you go to the Catholic Catechism 2358, it says explicitly, you may not discriminate against homosexuals for any reason. Any reason. That's our faith. So even in these big established religions like Catholicism, where you have bishops and priests and everything else preaching a doctrine that is counter to the established faith, that in and of itself is the same thing that evangelicals and these wellness and spiritual gurus were taking part of. So
yes, it is.
It's across the board. It's ego. We all have ego.
Yes. And it's egocentrism. I feel like there's a difference between having a healthy ego, and I don't mean that in a euphemistic way. I mean like literally just having a healthy ego, a healthy id, and a healthy super ego, and you're balanced. I mean, it's something you have to work at every day. It's not like, oh, I achieved balance, so now, therefore, I will be balanced perfectly from now on. But there's the difference between having that healthy baseline and then actually engaging in egotism, which is, just what you described. Self-focused to the exclusion of all else. And, everybody who's not on my level and woke is not as good as me.
So let's get into a little bit, let's touch on using the Vice article about conspirituality. So that what they did was they took these health and wellness industry leaders, and so what was interesting in this particular interview in the Vice article, there was a gentleman who coined the phrase Trump hippies.
Yes.
Right? So we always expect that the health and wellness is always on the left. It's those free granola lefties, but it's not. These are people on both sides of the political spectrum, and in particular, this particular wellness interview focused on how you go from that libertarian right wellness to the conspiracy thing. So Andy, I know that you're going to agree with me. There's a huge profit margin in that, but then Dominique, take us through how you go from health and wellness. Like, you're not a conspiracy theorist when it comes to vaccines and So what made you different? I don't understand how we had so many of these white, let's be clear, white wellness experts who were on the front line cheering all of this on to the detriment of all of our population, in particular persons of color. So
and JP Sears, perfect example of that is JP Sears. But you know what? I just want to say, before I answer that question, don't click on his videos, because that's going to give him money, and you don't want to keep that train going. Let it derail. It's, like a bad Amtrak train, let that thing derail, okay? So, but you can get to that, I think you can easily get to that place when your egotism overtakes it. It's that toxic individualism that we, particularly as Americans, you and I, Carrie, and I think we see a lot of that. We've seen a lot of that together with the work that you and I have done together. There's a lot of toxic individualism, especially with Americans. I hate to say it. I've played into that in my past too, and I've really had to take a look at, why is it that we have to separate ourselves from the community to this extent? It's okay to have a community identity. It's okay to have communal responsibilities. That's okay. That's expected. That's a human thing. To separate yourself to such an extent that you are out of touch with reality is so toxic. And I think that's the answer to the question. You've separated yourself, and not by accident, from reality to such an extent that you are just in another dimension, like you're not even connected to shared reality anymore. And that is what happens when we're told to discard a part of who we are, to discard the ego, to discard a part of an integral part of yourself as a human being. And either I see it going one of two ways when people take it to a toxic extent. Either their self devolves and disappears, and it's all, what can I do for others, and I don't take care of myself, or it's everyone else fades away and I only care about myself. And I feel like that is what we're seeing with some of these conspiritual gurus. Everyone else fades away. It's all about my rights and my freedoms, and damn it, I'm not going to wear a mask. And if it behooves my egotistic worldview to believe that, for instance, this pandemic is a hoax, then I will believe that in lieu of, and even if it flies in the face of all fact and all shared reality. So I just think that's a very toxic, egotistical mindset, but it doesn't happen by accident. So
let me ask you this. So we know that at one end of the spectrum, there's narcissism, and that is an actual clinical diagnosis, and that is a very big challenge to deal with. But on the lower end of the spectrum, particularly when it comes to COVID and, the American exceptionalism, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, and I did it by myself.
No, you didn't. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But would you agree that this comes from a place of fear? Because because here comes the pandemic. There's nothing I can do. It doesn't care what I believe, doesn't care what kind of person I am. So we have the white community denying events, denying the severity of it. And in fact, this conversation yesterday, they were still trying to say it was just like the flu.
And it's just not, Yeah,
right. So what did we... Yeah, truly it is. So Dominique, take us through what do we do about this? Because I'm at the point personally, and I don't know if other people feel like this, but I'm at the point personally where I have so many. In fact, we shout out to Joseph's family. We are all praying for you to recover. And this is a person who literally has a heart of gold, who has gone through so much adversity in his life, finally in a place where he's getting sunshine and happiness, and he is now struggling, fighting for his life with COVID. So in the back of my head, I've got all of these things, personal, family that I have lost, whatever. I am so over having these conversations still a year later. So how do I do it? Because I recognize that me, saying what I really feel probably is not the best way to do it. So what do I do?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Potty mouth.
Yeah, really, Carrie.
Yeah.
But you bring up a good point. Sometimes I feel like sometimes this is just a simple matter of timing rather than like what you say, because I have noticed that a lot of people who didn't believe in COVID at first are now finally understanding that it's happening, because they've had to physically experience it themselves to realize that it is happening, because they are so...
So that's the ego at play again.
Yeah, it is. It's egotism. It's self-focused to the exclusion of all else mindset, and a healthy dose of exceptionalism too. Yes, exactly. And I think you can't really, there are points at which people simply have to learn by living. Unfortunately, their object lessons cost other people health and life. And, you're not existing in a vacuum. And that's what I think some of these people have trouble understanding, especially white people who have led privileged lives. And I mean, I have light-skinned privilege. I have straight passing privilege. I have quite a few privileges myself. I'm not trying to act like I don't, FYI, but people who are privileged are, they're not used to having something that just simply doesn't care what your background is or what you think or what your beliefs are, like COVID, that is an equal opportunity attacker. That doesn't compute for them. And unfortunately, I do think that they had to actually have conversations with friends and relatives to explain how this personally affects me. So that opened the doorway. So give us, you are an expert at this. I've seen you do it. I've talked to you about doing it. Hi, Annie. Annie. Oh, Anna. Anna. That's Anna. Hi, Anna. I didn't see her.
I'm Andy.
Yeah, Annie, Anna, all the A's.
Yeah, so you are so good at diffusing hostility, and you tend to do it by asking pointed questions.
Yeah,
you want to take us through some of that?
Wow, that was a good assessment, Carrie. That's
true. So take us through that. When it comes to whether it's COVID, anti-vaxxers, this wellness thing, or just outright racism, how do you deal with it?
I guess what I try to do, I use this term, and it's not one that I coined, called like tactical empathy. And, you really have to be able to empathize with other people and understand where they're coming from, even if you totally disagree and think it's, bat doo-doo and So
you can say that.
Okay, batshit. Okay. You have to be able to empathize and understand these other people's points. And, what I try to do when I talk to COVID deniers specifically is to get into like what their focus is. A lot of these people are family people. They have kids, they have elderly parents. And to just say something like, I hear you saying what you're saying. I hear that you feel like this is just like the flu, and that I hear that you're concerned about, local businesses or what have you. How would you feel if somebody gave your mom this illness and endangered your mom's life? Or how would you feel if this happened to your dad or your daughter or your son or your child? Like, how would you feel about that if it became personal for you? And if they're being honest, they will say, oh, yeah, you know what? That's true. I wouldn't like that very much. And I guess I would have to concede that it's a relatively easy disease to pass along if that happened. But there are a lot of people who are just going to be stubborn with you and say, Darwinism, the mom will either kick the bucket or she'll pull through. And it's like, right. Yeah, but what are the other possibilities other than forcing mom to have to make a life or death, Right.
And we saw that with early on when they were talking about, grandparents go out there and give your lives and go shopping.
Right.
For the economy, right?
For the stock market. Yes.
Yeah. Do it for the stocks.
Right. And that is such a bizarre thing where even Republicans, that had to set them back a little bit. Like, right. What are you actually saying?
What are you advocating here? Yeah. I thought you guys were against death panels. Okay. Come on.
Right. So now when it comes to these folks, and like you said, it really requires them to have a moment of honesty. Mm-hmm. But I think the core of the argument for me, my tactic, and you tell me where I'm wrong, is I get that when they're talking about we need to reopen schools and we need to open businesses, I'm looking at the meaning past the words.
Exactly. Yes.
I recognize that what you're saying is that there's an economic component to this, and you are struggling and terrified just like the rest of us.
Yes.
But what can we do here to make sure that you have what you need, and you and I are in agreement, and you and I are maybe pushing back on politicians in a more effective way? Well,
that is where I get stuck in these conversations oftentimes too, because people will say things like, oh, well, I'll be like, well, what can we do to help you get what you need? Oh, well, I'm against socialism. It's like, okay, but you're clearly in need of something. And it seems like we could work together to get you whatever it is that fills that need. So
do you think that comes from decades of us looking down on the poors?
Absolutely.
And the welfare?
The poors, yes.
The poors. Well, that is. So, Andy, you're in Canada where,
I am.
Rabid socialists up there.
Oh, yes, we are. Well, our rabbits are socialists.
Rabbit socialists.
Rabbit. So, but you're on lockdown, and I know that you are frustrated and upset too, but you have a different perspective. You have national health care. You have a more reasonable approach. You guys have been getting a stimulus every month. Is that right?
For people that are, that are not working. Right. Like the capitalists are finding better and better ways to get people, into the offices and, justify. We had to do the shutdown because, like the U.S., for people that don't know, we have a central federal government based in Ottawa, but we also, each province has a provincial government, right? Our federal government is a liberal government, which is like the Democrats. Our provincial government is a conservative government, which is like the Republicans, right? So at the beginning, when everything was new about this and people were uncertain about what was going to happen, the two governments did a really good job of getting together and just shutting it down. Right.
That is good to hear.
It was. And I, as critical as I have been of our conservative provincial government, I gave them kudos for what they were able to accomplish quickly and get our numbers down. Right. And when you think about we're your next door neighbors, right? That's a big accomplishment considering how poorly you guys have dealt with it. And I'm not trying to be critical, but it's just based in numbers. Right. And so. But as things came to light and, they understood, and the numbers were going consistently down through the summer, like everybody knew they would, like Dr. Burdett told us they would, because of people being outside more and all of this stuff, right? But we were also told that be careful of the fall, because, you know, the second wave is typically bigger because people have a false sense of security going through the summer, and that's exactly what's happened.
That's exactly what's happened.
We went through 2.5 months of numbers skyrocketing way above where they were in the spring, right? Until finally there was so much pressure on the provincial government to shut everything down after Christmas.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So we went from, maybe 1,000 new cases a day in Ontario at the height of it in the last spring, to the point where it was, we were at 3,500, 4,000, 4,500 new cases every day at the beginning of January, right? So we were doing what the experts told us we were going to be doing if we didn't take care of the situation, right? So you've got this, still, although it's Canada and, we're supposed to be socialists, we're not. We're full-on capitalists, just like the U.S. is. We just have a few more social assistance in place, right? Like our healthcare and stuff. But, although our healthcare doesn't cost us anything, that doesn't mean that the coronavirus is going to be any less deadly to our society. It is the most important thing, and people are, you've got to go back to work. Right. Our numbers are starting to go back down again. They're back into about the 1,000 range now. But once again, the Conservative government is opening the markets up, opening different areas up, right? Because we have to get people back to work, because the kids have got to go back to school, right? And, so once again, we're falling into the same trap that we did the last time, because the neoliberals tell us that, the market is king and we have to, and your kids need to go to school. And so my biggest fear in Canada is that it's this wave after wave after wave where you get the numbers going in the right direction, but by opening the markets back up, you reverse that, especially now that we're seeing more different, highly contagious strains of the virus coming out, right?
We haven't rolled the vaccine out all the way. So it's like, whoa there.
Well, and you can order as much as you want, but, and Carrie and you and I talk about this all the time, that it's not the money that's the problem, it's the resources, right? Mm-hmm. There's only so many vaccines in the world to buy. It doesn't matter how much you pay for them. If they aren't there to purchase, you're not getting them. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's the thing that we're finding right now. Right. And so we're in danger of going through on, a much smaller scale, but of what the U.S. is going through, because our governments aren't taking this seriously enough and providing the support needed to actually help us. Right. That's this. To quote Fadl Kaboub when he was on our show, right? Your job right now should be to stay at home, and we can get this virus under control. We will pay you to do that job.
Yes.
But they're not doing that because of capitalism.
That is a good take. I like that.
Right. So getting back to the woke whiteness of the wellness community, who is actually exacerbating the situation, I feel like. So, Andy, you've got universal coverage in Canada. Yes. We're not seeing as much of this come out of Canada as we are in a country like the United States, where access to healthcare has been denied for so many, and it's left people, it's still the exceptionalism and the bootstrap theory that I have to have personal responsibility. ACA was founded on personal responsibility. You had the payment that you had, there was an economic component, and then also, they cut back on your annual wellness. So even under ACA, if you mention a new issue or illness, it gets coded now, so there's a cost to you. So it's pushed more people into alternative medicines. And again, I'm not trying to downplay the efficacy of some of these treatments. What I'm looking at specifically is the purveyors themselves, the entrepreneurs, and, let's be honest, vulture capitalists within the industry who have seen an opportunity here with COVID, bought into all of the conspiracy theory, and are actually using it to keep people in their own economic space, buying their products and books and supplements.
Yeah.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. That's the best time.
Yeah.
When you see something like this happening, right? The amount of new snake oil that hits the market is phenomenal, right?
But I think that's something that people, unless you have a background like any of us have in education and or have educated yourself about what the scientific method is and how that applies to how discoveries are made about illness and medical treatment and all of that, unless you have an education that centers around that allows you to understand that the scientific method is the way that we understand the natural world around us, then you will fall victim to snake oil and you will fall victim to fake cures and that sort of thing, because you can't distinguish between fake and real. And if all it comes down to is whether, like you're on that bootstrap theory and you're like, oh, these gurus have really pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. They've made their own lives great. And, that's the only metric you have for gauging whether or not, a treatment is effective or a mindset is appropriate for you, is that this guru, who I think is really successful, believes in it. So I should too. That's your only metric. You're going to fall for everything, whether it be COVID denialism, whether it be QAnon. I mean, you're going to fall hook, line, and sinker. And then, of course, once you go down that path, you're going to start seeing everybody who doesn't believe in you as sheep or whatever the cool terminology is nowadays.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. And you get caught up in what every group does in this echo chamber of support, right?
Correct.
That doesn't allow alternative ideas to enter. Mm-hmm. And so it's like you're locked into this group now, and you can't get out of it because you can't get enough information to understand why that might not be the way to think about it.
Right. You don't have critical thinking. Exactly.
I look at, I made a really distinctive connection at the beginning of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. As far as the evangelical aspect of this, when you were talking to people and the most outrage that you found was in the different religions and how aghast they were that we it's okay to send people home from their jobs, tell them they can't get haircuts and they can't go to the gym, but don't tell me I can't go to church.
Right.
We all remember that one lady in her car confronted by the person that was covered in the blood of Christ.
Yeah.
That she was fully protected from the coronavirus because of the blood of Christ.
Right. And that is dangerously disconnected thinking. That is not in any way connected with reality. And you have to be able to understand. I think that's another thing, too, that people fail to grasp in the wellness community and the spiritual community is that there is a huge difference between allegory and fact and between, parable types of tales and sort of like metaphorical, stories and actual fact. I don't think Jesus would co-sign that person's view about how his blood protects everyone from COVID.
Yeah, because as far as I know, you're only allowed to donate blood every 8 weeks. There's not enough to go around.
There's not enough for everybody. Come on. Don't be selfish.
So I got to give you a story. When we first moved here to Albuquerque, we went to the oldest church in the city. It's beautiful.
I've been there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is during the height of COVID. Everyone's masked up. But when I walked in there, I was like, oh my goodness, they're getting ready to have mass, right? And so it's a very, very small church.
Yes,
and I looked
is.
over, and for those of you who are not familiar with Catholicism or a church, there's always a fount there, or a little vessel to hold what's supposed to be holy water. Not blessed, holy water. Big difference. It was empty. And I looked at the usher and I'm like, it's empty. And he's like, yeah, that's a regulation for COVID safety. I'm like, okay, that's weird. But then I looked in front and all of the pews are getting full of people. I'm like, you've got this backwards. First, you don't need a church to hold a mass. Do it outside.
Right.
It's beautiful. Do it outside.
Gorgeous. It's New Mexico, for crying out loud.
Right. And I'm like, you have this entire square here. And oh boy, there's some heathens over here. Maybe they'll get some blessing. Come on, let's go outside. And no, they're not doing it. So what's happening now is we go back to the economic component of this. There's a Catholic high school that has to find a new home because the diocese has to sell the building now because tithes aren't coming in and all of this.
Right.
You know, so for all these spirituality people, Catholics included, you can tithe online. You can do that. You don't have to be in the building to do it. But so here is where I think it's the economics has really clouded the core of spirituality. Like we started this talking about the ego, but there's ego and the grift that's in play in all of this too. So, all right, so we could go on for a very long time, and we definitely want to have you back for more of these conversations, particularly, you know, this is Black History Month, which is all of our history in Utah.
Sorry.
Hey, Toby.
Well, I was going to say, you should do something about that cough.
It's really bad.
Totally. But so there are parents in Utah who are trying to opt out of Black History Month, not realizing that it's American History Month.
It's all of our history. It's all of our history.
So on that note, we will. Boy, we got a long way to go, and it's not just in the health and wellness, and just we are a stiff-necked people. That's all there is to it. So, but thank you so much for joining. It's always a delight to have you.
Same goes. I love being here. Thanks for having me.
And so, if somebody wants to get a little bit more of the Dominique perspective, how do they follow you?
They should go to, well, it depends on what social media platforms you're on, but you should go to Dominique Does Life on Facebook and Dominique Does Life and First Question Podcast on Twitter. And I can put all the links, I don't know, in the comments or something at some point of this.
Sounds great.
We have a lifestyle podcast and a true crime comedy podcast. So if you're into that, come check us out.
That's awesome.
Yes, at Dominique's Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Exactly, yes. Correct. Wild Kingdom is a good descriptor for us, actually.
They teach you patience and humility. Always. This is what pets are for. But so thank you again. And Andy and I will be back on Friday. And I'm excited about the next guest that we have coming on. This gentleman has I don't want to date him, but let's say a significant career.
Well, you can't date him. You're married.
Yeah, okay, come on.
No, I don't want to. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Right off the rails.
That was right. Where are you going, Carrie? I get some holy water. I'm sorry. That's hand sanitizer.
No. Wait.
Yeah.
I'm a Catholic. Of course, I have holy water on me. I do. Dan Weiner will be here. He's an investigative journalist with a very long, distinguished career. And he just published a piece about a bunch of utility executives around the country getting arrested and indicted for fraud and corruption. It's an amazing piece, and it was not enough to just retweet it. We wanted him to come on and talk about it, talk about how he got this information, and then also it's a rare opportunity to have an investigative journalist who deals in corruption, covers all of that with such a long career. How many death threats has this guy had? So we'll find out. So
Wow, that's cool. I'll be listening in for that.
Yeah, so this is on Friday. We will have him there. Hey, Toby.
Toby.
He's all ready.
Oh, kisses for mama.
Oh, he's such a kissy guy. He's a big cuddler.
Nice. So, Andy, that's all I got. Dominique, anything you want to leave us with, and then we'll get to Andy's last words.
I guess I would just say, no matter what side you're on, no matter what take you have on any number of issues, try to understand why you have it, and that will help you to understand why other people hold the views they have. So try to understand yourself, try to understand your reasoning and your motivation for believing what you believe, and then, of course, that will allow you to do the same for other people. So use that tactical empathy once you've developed it, and keep asking those awkward questions. I feel like that's my motto actually that's our motto for my podcast, First Question, keep asking questions, but keep asking those important questions. And if you are uncomfortable about a topic, or you feel that a question is awkward, you need to ask it. That's why it feels awkward to you. So make sure you're asking those uncomfortable questions and having those awkward conversations, because they end up being the important ones that change the world.
There you go. Well, that beats the hell out of anything I was going to say. I think we'll just leave it at that. Thank you so much, Dominique, once again for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and to get your amazing insights on this crazy world that we have. Right.
Oh, yes.
And thank you again, Carrie, as well. And we will see you on Friday. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's hump day. It's only 2 more to go. Doesn't mean anything to me. I'm retired. But for you, it means something. So take care, everyone. See you on Friday.
We about that, we in the PA, spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keeping it G.